The Unspoken Bond, a story of love, trust, and overcoming obstacles. The world seemed to stand still when I first saw her. It wasn't anything extraordinary. It wasn't some divine moment filled with sparks or music playing in the background. But there was something about her that made time feel different. She wasn't looking at me. She was too busy with her book, but I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was engrossed in the words she was reading, occasionally flipping through the pages as though they held the answers to everything. I watched her from my seat at the cafe, pretending to sip my coffee, pretending not to care. But deep down, I knew there was a connection, something I couldn't explain, something that pulled me toward her like a magnet. My mind was racing, thinking of ways to break the silence, to introduce myself, to let her know I existed in the same world. But I just sat there, too afraid to disturb the peace of that moment. As the minutes turned into hours, I felt the weight of her presence. It wasn't just physical. It was a kind of unspoken energy that filled the room, wrapping itself around me, making me hyper-aware of every little detail. The way the sunlight streamed through the window and caught her hair, making it shimmer like gold. The soft rustle of pages as she turned them, her fingers gently tracing the edges of the book, as though the act itself was some sacred ritual. I was fascinated, almost hypnotized by the way she existed in this world, so effortlessly, so naturally. Eventually, she closed the book, marking her place with a small, delicate ribbon. My heart skipped a beat, unsure if I was relieved or disappointed. She stood up, and for a brief moment, our eyes met. It was brief, just a flicker of recognition, but in that fleeting moment, I felt like she saw me too. Not fully, not completely, but enough to make me feel like I wasn't invisible. She walked away, and I sat there, frozen, holding my breath, as if the whole world was waiting with me. I watched her leave the cafe, the door closing softly behind her. The space she left behind seemed vast, as if something was missing, something important. It took me a while to shake off the lingering feeling. But as the days passed, I found myself returning to that same cafe, hoping for a chance encounter, a second meeting, a continuation of that brief, perfect moment. It felt silly at first, this obsession, this hope that fate might somehow bring us together again. But I couldn't help it. The thought of her was always in the back of my mind, tugging at my thoughts, reminding me of what could be. And then one day, there she was again. Not at the same table, not reading her book, but standing in line, ordering her coffee. I could see the same peaceful demeanor, the same focus on the world around her, the same quiet strength. I wasn't sure if she noticed me yet, or if I was simply another face in the crowd. But I knew something had shifted in me. I knew I couldn't just sit there and watch her go by without saying anything. My heart raced as I stood up, my legs feeling shaky, as if they were betraying me. I wasn't prepared for this. I didn't have a plan, a perfect line, a rehearsed speech. But something about her made me want to try. I walked up to the counter, standing next to her, my hands trembling slightly. When she turned to face me, I saw the same brief flicker of recognition in her eyes. I said, my voice unexpectedly steady. She smiled. A small, gentle smile that made my heart flutter. He, she replied, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. The world outside the cafe seemed to fade. The noise of the city, the chatter of other customers, it all vanished. It was just the two of us in this tiny corner of the world, sharing a brief, unspoken understanding. What's your name? I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated for a second, as if deciding whether or not to reveal something so simple yet so personal. But then, with a soft exhale, she answered, Isabelle. Isabelle, I repeated, letting the name linger in the air. It felt like it fit her, like it was meant to be said. I'm Mark. We exchanged a few more words. Something light and easy, almost casual, but it didn't matter. The connection was already there, unspoken yet undeniable. When I left the cafe that day, my heart was lighter. I hadn't expected anything. No grand confession, no dramatic turn of events. But something had shifted. A small moment had opened the door to something bigger, something unknown, and it felt right. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself back at the cafe, hoping for another chance to see Isabelle, to talk to her. Each time, it felt like the world was conspiring to bring us together, one small encounter at a time. Our conversations grew deeper, more personal, and we began to share things we hadn't said to anyone else. It wasn't just about the books she read or the coffee we drank. It was about life, about dreams, about fears and desires. We were building something slowly, something unspoken but understood. I didn't know where it would lead, or if it would even lead anywhere at all. But I couldn't deny the pull, the gravity that kept bringing me back to her, again and again. Every time we spoke, it felt like a step closer, like we were both trying to make sense of what was happening between us. The connection grew stronger, the bond unspoken but undeniable. It was a relationship built on moments, on shared silences, on a look that said more than words ever could. There were no guarantees, no promises, but for the first time in my life, I didn't need them. All I needed was her. The days between our meetings began to blur together, each one filled with an almost desperate longing to see her again. It was a strange feeling, this mix of anticipation and uncertainty. I'd never been one to invest so much emotional energy in a person I barely knew. Yet, with Isabelle, everything felt different. Each moment we spent together seemed like a fleeting treasure, precious yet fragile, as if it might slip away if I didn't hold on tight enough. But the more I saw her, the more I realized something. I wasn't the only one who felt this way. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a connection that neither of us had ever fully acknowledged. But we both knew it was there. I started finding excuses to visit the cafe more often, hoping she'd be there, hoping that our paths would cross again. I tried to play it cool, to act as if it didn't matter. But every time she walked through the door, my heart skipped a beat. She'd glance around the room, searching for a place to sit, and every time, my eyes would meet hers for a brief second before I quickly looked away. The anticipation was almost unbearable. One afternoon, I arrived earlier than usual, hoping to catch her before the cafe got crowded. The place was quiet, with only a few regulars scattered around, sipping their drinks and reading their papers. I sat by the window, trying to appear casual, pretending not to care as I stared out at the passing cars. I knew that eventually she'd walk in, and when she did, my heart would race all over again. And then, there she was. Isabelle walked in, her usual grace evident in every step. She was wearing a soft blue sweater that matched the calmness in her eyes. She looked around, her gaze settling on me as she made her way toward the counter. I held my breath, watching her order her coffee, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say but couldn't find the words for. After a few moments, she turned and walked over to my table, her smile as warm and effortless as ever. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice soft like the sound of a gentle breeze. I nodded, unable to speak at first. My throat felt tight, as if the world had suddenly shrunk down to just the two of us in that small corner of the café. She sat across from me, placing her cup on the table before meeting my gaze. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence was comfortable, not awkward, as if we were both waiting for the right words to come. I couldn't help but notice how easy it felt to be near her. The tension I'd felt in the past, the uncertainty seemed to dissolve the moment we sat together. "So, how's your day been?" she asked, breaking the silence. I smiled, relieved that she had taken the initiative. "Busy, but it's better now." She raised an eyebrow. "Better now." "Well, it's not every day I get to sit here with someone I actually want to talk to," I said, my voice a little less steady than I'd hoped. Isabelle's eyes softened, and she leaned back in her chair. "I feel the same way," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about our last conversation. You were saying something about how you don't really connect with people easily. I didn't know if you were just being modest or if it was something more." I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. I hadn't realized how much I'd revealed the last time we spoke, how much I'd opened up to her without even meaning to. But there was something about her that made it feel okay to be vulnerable, to admit things I hadn't told anyone in years. I think it's both, I said after a moment. I've always been the type to keep people at a distance. Maybe it's because I don't know how to let people in, or maybe because I've been hurt before. But with you, it feels different. She was quiet for a moment, and I wondered if I'd said too much. But then she smiled, a soft, knowing smile that made me feel both exposed and understood at the same time. "I get it," she said, her voice so calm, so sure. "I've always been the same way. It's easier to stay distant, to protect yourself. But sometimes you meet someone, and everything just clicks. And you realize that the risk is worth it." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. "Is that how you feel?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a slow sip of her coffee, her eyes never leaving mine. It felt like a lifetime before she spoke again. "I think I'm starting to," she said softly. "But I'm also scared. Scared of what might happen if we let ourselves get too close." The words hung in the air between us, charged with something unspoken. I could feel the weight of her fear, the vulnerability in her voice. And I realized that, in a way, it mirrored my own. We were both standing on the edge of something unknown, something that could either bring us closer or tear us apart. But despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward her. It was like a quiet voice inside me, telling me to take the leap, to trust that maybe, just maybe, this could be something real. "Isabelle," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if we took the leap? What if we stopped holding back and just let whatever happens happen?" Her eyes searched mine, and for a moment, I thought she might pull away, that she might laugh or tell me it was too soon. But instead, she reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine in the gentlest of touches. "I'm not sure," she whispered, "but I think I want to find out." And in that moment, everything seemed to fall into place. The uncertainty, the fear, the hesitation. It all melted away, leaving only the connection between us, raw and unguarded. We didn't need to say anything more. The unspoken bond between us was enough. As we sat there, hands still touching, I realized that this was just the beginning. Whatever happened next, whatever twists and turns our relationship would take, I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't afraid anymore. Because, with Isabelle, I felt like I had finally found something worth fighting for. And in that moment, I was ready to let go of the past and embrace whatever the future held. The weeks that followed were filled with an intensity I had never known before. It wasn't the kind of passion that burned bright and fast, leaving nothing but ashes in its wake. No, this was something slower, something deeper. It was like the gradual unfolding of a flower, petal by petal, revealing something beautiful and fragile underneath. With Isabelle, every day felt like I was discovering a new part of her heart, part of her soul. And it was a discovery I never wanted to end. We spent more time together, not just in the cafe, but in the quiet corners of the world where we could talk without distractions. Sometimes we walked for hours, just the two of us, through the city streets, sharing pieces of our lives we had never told anyone else. And in those moments, the world seemed to narrow down to just us. Everything else, the noise, the rush of life, the uncertainty of the future, faded into the background. All that mattered was the warmth between us, the quiet understanding that grew with every conversation. One evening, as we sat on a bench in a small park near the river, I looked over at her and noticed how the fading light of the day made her hair glow, how the shadows played across her face. She looked up at the sky, her eyes lost in the beauty of the sunset, and for a moment, I wondered if she was thinking the same thing I was. Was she feeling the same pull, the same connection? Or was it just me, caught up in something that could never be? I wanted to ask her, wanted to know if she saw this the way I did. But the words were stuck, lodged somewhere deep inside. And all I could do was sit there, watching her, feeling the quiet weight of the moment settle over us. She must have sensed my hesitation because, without looking at me, she spoke. "I've never really believed in love at first sight," she said, her voice quiet, almost contemplative. "But with you, it's different. It feels like we've known each other forever, even though we've only just started." I felt my heart beat faster at her words, at the way she put into words everything I had been feeling. It was like she had taken the thoughts right out of my head and laid them bare between us, something raw and honest. "I feel the same," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, it's like we're connected in a way I can't explain." She turned to face me then, her eyes meeting mine, and for the first time, I saw something different in her gaze. It wasn't just the soft affection that had been there before, but something deeper, something more vulnerable. "I'm scared, Mark," she confessed, her voice cracking slightly as she spoke. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know if I can let someone in, if I can trust someone like this." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, not because I hadn't expected them, but because I had feared them. I had feared that one day she would pull away, that the bond we had would shatter under the weight of the past, under the fear that both of us were carrying. But I didn't pull away. Instead, I reached for her hand, taking it in mine, grounding myself in the feel of her skin against mine. "It's okay to be scared," I said softly, squeezing her hand. "I'm scared too. But that doesn't mean we can't try. It doesn't mean we can't figure it out together." For a long moment, she didn't say anything, and the silence between us was heavy with unspoken fears and unacknowledged truths. But then she slowly nodded, a small, uncertain smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I want to try," she whispered, and I felt a rush of relief flood through me, like I could finally breathe again. From that moment on, things between us shifted. It wasn't a sudden change, but a gradual one, like the slow settling of dust after a storm. We started building something, piece by piece, something real. We weren't perfect. We had our moments of doubt, our disagreements, our silent nights where neither of us knew how to bridge the gap between us. But there was always the underlying current of something stronger, a connection that neither of us could deny. We spent more time in each other's worlds, learning the little things about one another. I learned that Isabelle had a love for old movies, especially the black and white classics that made her heart ache with nostalgia. She learned that I liked to lose myself in books, that there was something about a good story that made me feel less alone. We shared memories from our pasts, the people we had loved and lost, the things that had shaped us into who we were. And with each shared memory, we grew closer, even when the weight of our pasts felt too heavy to carry. It wasn't always easy. There were times when we hurt each other without meaning to, when our fears bubbled to the surface and made things feel like they were falling apart. But every time, we found our way back to each other. We learned to listen, to understand, to give each other the space we needed to grow without pushing each other away. One rainy afternoon, as we sat in a quiet cafe, sipping our drinks and talking about nothing in particular, I found myself looking at her in a way I hadn't before. It wasn't just the way her hair framed her face or the way her lips curved when she smiled. It was something deeper, something in the way she made me feel like I was finally home. "I'm glad we're doing this," I said, my voice low but sincere. "I'm glad we're figuring this out together." She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with something I couldn't name. It wasn't just affection or love or even longing. It was something more. Something I hadn't expected to find, something I hadn't known I needed until now. "I don't know what the future holds, Mark," she said quietly. "But I know that I want to walk through it with you, no matter what happens." And in that moment, I realized that this was what I had been waiting for. This wasn't a fairy tale, and it wasn't easy. But it was real, and it was ours. We weren't just two people trying to navigate the complexities of a relationship. We were two people who had found something rare and precious. A bond that couldn't be broken, no matter how hard the world tried. As the rain fell outside, the world seemed to fade away. It was just the two of us, sitting there in that cafe, talking about our hopes and fears, about the things that mattered and the things that didn't. And I knew, in that moment, that no matter what came next, we would face it together. Because with Isabelle, I had finally found something worth holding on to. The months that followed felt like a whirlwind of emotions. Intense, unpredictable, but somehow comforting. Isabelle and I had built something together, something I never thought I'd experience. A connection that didn't need words to be understood. But as time passed, I began to realize that what we had wasn't just a casual relationship. It was more complicated than that, more vulnerable than I had ever allowed myself to admit. And I couldn't help but wonder, was I ready for what came next? The uncertainty had crept in slowly, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't that I didn't trust her. Far from it. Isabelle had proven time and again that she was someone I could rely on, someone who made me feel seen and understood. But there was a part of me, buried deep down, that still feared getting too close. It was a fear I couldn't shake, even though I didn't want to acknowledge it. We'd been spending nearly every day together. And as much as I cherished those moments, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was amiss. There was this quiet undercurrent, a sense that we hadn't yet fully confronted the things that mattered, the things that had brought us together in the first place. One evening, as we sat on the same bench by the river, the sun setting behind us, I watched Isabelle in a way I hadn't before. She was quieter than usual, her gaze fixed on the water, her fingers nervously tracing patterns on the wood. I could tell she was lost in thought, but I wasn't sure whether to break the silence or wait for her to speak first. It was becoming clear that we were both struggling with something. The love between us was there, undeniably real, but it was accompanied by a tension that neither of us could escape. I knew that this was the moment where we had to face the truth, whatever it might be. "I've been thinking," I began, my voice breaking the silence, unsure if I was ready to go where I knew this conversation would lead. She turned toward me, her eyes meeting mine with a mix of curiosity and caution. "About what?" "About us," I said, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. "About how things have been going between us. Don't get me wrong, I love being with you. But I think we're both carrying something. And I'm not sure if we've talked about it enough." Her brow furrowed slightly, and I could see her processing what I was saying. She was quiet for a long time, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd said the wrong thing. But then, her expression softened, and she spoke. "I know what you mean," she said, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. "It's like we're building something, but we're not really sure what it is yet. I feel like we've been moving so fast, and maybe we haven't given ourselves enough time to really understand what we want." I nodded, relieved that she was on the same page. It felt good to finally speak the unspoken, to name the quiet doubts that had been lingering between us. But even as I acknowledged the tension, I knew that it wasn't going to be enough to just talk about it. We needed to act, to make a decision. "Do you think we're rushing things?" I asked, my voice quiet. Isabelle paused, her eyes flickering between my face and the horizon. "Maybe," she said after a long pause. "I don't want to lose what we have, but I also don't want to ignore the fact that we haven't really faced the bigger picture. We've been avoiding some hard questions, and I don't know if that's healthy for either of us." It was a conversation I had been avoiding, a conversation that had been on my mind for weeks, but now that it was out in the open, I could feel the weight of it, the realization that we hadn't truly dealt with the things that mattered. The things that, if left unchecked, could unravel everything we had built. "Isabelle," I said softly, "I care about you. More than I ever thought I could care about someone. But I can't ignore the fact that we both have baggage, things we haven't worked through. And I think if we don't address those things, it might catch up to us eventually." She looked at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, perhaps, or maybe a quiet understanding. "I know," she whispered. "I've been trying to pretend it's not there, trying to push it aside. But deep down, I know that if we're going to make this work, we need to be honest with each other. We need to face what's holding us back." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. We were at a crossroads, I realized, a moment of truth that would define everything that came next. And as much as I wanted to just hold on to what we had, to keep things as they were, I knew that wouldn't be fair to either of us. If we wanted something real, we needed to face the challenges, the doubts, and the fears head on. "I'm scared, Mark," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Scared that we're not ready for this. Scared that we're too different, too broken to make it work." I reached for her hand, holding it firmly, grounding myself in the simple act of touch. "I'm scared too. But I think we're both worth fighting for. And if we're willing to face the hard stuff together, then maybe we can make it work." Isabelle's eyes softened as she looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a glimmer of hope in them. A hope that hadn't been there before. A hope that, maybe, just maybe, we could overcome the fears and uncertainties that had been holding us back. "I want to fight for this," she said quietly, her voice full of conviction. "I want to fight for us." And in that moment, I knew that we had crossed a threshold. We weren't just two people holding on to something fragile anymore. We were two people who had decided to face the challenges together, to move forward with open hearts and a willingness to grow. The next few days were filled with honest conversations. We didn't have all the answers, and we didn't pretend that everything was perfect. But we talked about our fears, our insecurities, and the things we needed from each other. We were learning, slowly, how to build a relationship that wasn't just based on chemistry or attraction, but on trust, respect, and a shared understanding. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. There would be moments when we would stumble, when we would doubt ourselves, and when the weight of the past would feel too heavy to carry. But I also knew that we had something worth fighting for, something that had grown beyond the casual nature of what we had been before. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what the future held. Because whatever came next, I knew I wouldn't have to face it alone. With Isabelle by my side, I was ready to face the challenges ahead, no matter how difficult they might be. Because this wasn't just a love story, it was a journey. And I was ready to take the next step. The days that followed felt like a delicate balance, as if we were both learning to walk again, this time more aware of each step, more conscious of the space between us. After our heart-to-heart, we agreed on one thing. We would no longer avoid the difficult conversations, no longer keep the parts of ourselves locked away for fear of hurting the other. But it wasn't as easy as it seemed. The walls we had built to protect ourselves weren't so easily torn down. It was going to take time, patience, and a lot of trust. We didn't have all the answers. We didn't know exactly what the future would look like. But there was something beautiful about that uncertainty. About knowing that we were no longer pretending to have it all figured out. No longer clinging to the idea that love should be perfect. We were willing to make it work, even if that meant taking things slow, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, and facing our fears head on. Isabelle and I began to spend more time together, but this time things felt different. Our conversations went deeper, not just about our feelings for each other, but about our individual pasts, our struggles, and the things that had shaped us into who we were. We learned about the things we had never shared before, the secrets we had kept hidden, and the pain we had both carried for so long. One evening, we were sitting on the couch in my apartment, a quiet night with no distractions, just the two of us. Isabelle was curled up next to me, her head resting against my shoulder as we watched a movie. But I could sense the tension in her body, the way her fingers were tapping nervously on the armrest. I knew something was on her mind, something she hadn't said yet. I paused the movie and turned to face her, my hand resting gently on hers. "Isabelle, what's going on?" I asked softly, my voice low and steady. She took a deep breath, her eyes searching mine. "I've been thinking about something," she began, her voice hesitant. "About us. About what we're doing." My stomach tightened at the uncertainty in her tone. "What do you mean?" She shifted, sitting up a little straighter, her eyes never leaving mine. "I love being with you, Mark. I really do. But I think I'm still scared. Scared that I'm not enough for you. Scared that I'll let you down." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I had never seen Isabelle so vulnerable before. She was always the one who seemed to have it together, the one who hid her fears behind a quiet smile. But now, she was laying herself bare, and I could see how much she was struggling with the weight of her own doubts. I gently cupped her face in my hands, lifting her chin so she would look at me. "You don't have to be perfect, Isabelle," I said softly. "None of us are. But you are more than enough for me. You don't have to prove anything to me. I'm here because I want to be here, because I care about you." She didn't say anything for a long time, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to believe me, wanted to trust that I wasn't going anywhere, but I could tell that the scars from her past ran deep, that the fear of being abandoned or hurt again was something she couldn't easily shake. "I just don't want to be a burden," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't want to drag you down with all my baggage." I pulled her into my arms then, wrapping her in the comfort of my embrace. "Isabelle, you're not a burden, and you're not alone in this. We all have our baggage, our pasts that we carry with us. But that doesn't mean it defines us. It doesn't mean we can't build something real together. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to be willing to try." She held on to me tightly, as if my words were the anchor she needed to calm the storm inside. And in that moment, I knew that this was the hardest part. This was the moment where we both had to face our deepest fears and insecurities, the parts of ourselves we had hidden for so long. But if we were willing to face them together, maybe we could move past them. The next few weeks were filled with small victories and setbacks, moments of growth and moments of doubt. But through it all, Isabelle and I learned how to support each other in ways we never had before. We didn't try to fix each other. We didn't try to make each other perfect. We simply learned how to be there for each other when it mattered most. One Saturday afternoon, we went for a long walk in the park, our usual way of escaping the noise of the world. We talked about everything and nothing. Our hopes for the future, the little things that made us laugh, the things that scared us most. But this time, there was a new sense of peace between us, as if we had reached a place of understanding where the weight of our fears wasn't so heavy anymore. As we sat on a bench by the lake, watching the ducks swim lazily in the water, Isabelle turned to me, her eyes soft with affection. "I don't know what's going to happen," she said quietly. "But I know that I want to face it with you. I don't want to run away anymore. I want to try." Her words sent a wave of relief through me. I had been waiting for this moment, waiting for her to say that she was ready to move forward, to stop holding herself back. And now that she had, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. "I'm ready too," I said, my voice steady. "No matter what happens, I'm here. I want to build something with you, Isabelle. Something real." For the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. The uncertainty, the fear that had once loomed over us like a storm cloud, seemed to fade away. We weren't perfect, and we didn't have all the answers. But we were willing to keep moving forward, one step at a time, trusting that we could figure it out together. As we sat there, side by side, I realized that this was the beginning of something new. Something that wasn't just about love or attraction, but about trust, about vulnerability, and about building a future together. We weren't running from our fears anymore. We were facing them head-on, knowing that as long as we had each other, we could weather any storm. The rest of the afternoon passed in a comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when you're with someone who understands you completely. I didn't need to say anything else. We both knew that, no matter what came next, we were in this together. And as the sun set behind us, casting a warm glow over the park, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Hope that this was just the beginning of our journey, and that with each passing day, we would only grow closer, stronger, and more certain of what we had. Because with Isabelle by my side, I knew that we could face anything. The seasons changed, as they always do. Winter crept in slowly, painting the world in shades of gray and white, and with it came a quiet reflection. Time had passed since that afternoon by the lake, and the foundation we had built between us felt stronger than ever. Yet, as much as our relationship had evolved into something deep and lasting, there was still that underlying tension, a feeling that we were on the verge of something significant, a crossroads that neither of us had fully acknowledged. We were no longer afraid of the inevitable obstacles that would come. We had learned to face our fears together, to speak about the things that haunted us. But there was one thing that still weighed on both our minds, an unspoken truth neither of us had been brave enough to confront. It wasn't until one cold evening, sitting together in the warmth of my apartment, that the silence finally broke. Isabelle, who had always been the more reserved of the two of us, was unusually quiet. She sat across from me, her gaze fixed on the flickering flames in the fireplace. Her fingers were lightly tracing the rim of her mug, a small gesture that, in its own way, seemed to say everything. There was something different about her tonight, something that told me she had been carrying the weight of a thought she hadn't shared yet. "Mark," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something I've been thinking about. Something I need to tell you." I put down the book I had been reading and turned to face her. I could see the nervousness in her eyes, the way she avoided my gaze for a moment before looking back at me, searching for a way to put her feelings into words. I knew, instinctively, that this was going to be one of those moments, the kind that could either bring us closer or change everything. "What is it?" I asked gently, my heart suddenly racing with a quiet anticipation. She paused, taking a slow breath before speaking again, her words measured but deliberate. "I've been thinking about the future. About us. And I realize that I don't know how to move forward without knowing if we're both on the same page. I love you, Mark. I really do. But I don't want to keep pretending that everything is perfect when there's still this uncertainty. This fear that maybe we're not as strong as we think we are." Her words hit me with unexpected force, the raw honesty in them leaving me speechless for a moment. There was no anger, no accusation, just a quiet vulnerability that matched my own. I could feel the weight of what she was saying, the truth of it settling into the space between us. "I know what you mean," I said after a long pause, my voice low. "I've been thinking about it too. I know we've been through a lot and we've both changed, but I still believe in what we have. I still believe in us." She looked at me then, her eyes searching mine for any trace of doubt. I could see the fear there, the fear that what we had wasn't enough, that we weren't meant to last. I wanted to reach out, to reassure her that everything would be okay, that we would make it through. But deep down, I knew that the answer didn't lie in words. It was in the actions we took, the choices we made together. "What if it's not enough?" she whispered, her voice breaking just slightly. "What if we're too different? What if we can't overcome the things that make us?" The question hung in the air like a heavy mist, one I had been afraid to ask myself, let alone answer. But as I sat there, looking at Isabelle, I realized that the very thing that had brought us together, the bond we shared, was the answer. We had made it through so much, faced so many challenges, and yet here we were, still sitting together, still wanting to make it work. "I don't think it's about being perfect," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "It's not about having all the answers or being exactly the same. I think what matters is that we're willing to try. We're willing to face everything together, even the hard parts. I believe in us, Isabelle. I believe in what we have. She looked at me for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a faint smile spread across her face, one that was both relieved and hopeful. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice small but filled with a quiet strength. "But I'm willing to try too. I don't want to lose you, Mark. I don't want to walk away from something that feels this real." And in that moment, everything clicked. The weight that had been hanging over us, the fear of the unknown, began to lift. We didn't need to have everything figured out, didn't need to know exactly where our relationship would take us. All we needed was to be honest with each other, to face our fears, and to trust that the love we had was strong enough to guide us forward. The days that followed felt like a new beginning. We didn't rush into any grand decisions or make promises about forever. We took it one day at a time, savoring the quiet moments together, enjoying the simplicity of just being with each other. There were still challenges to face, still moments of doubt and insecurity, but now we knew how to handle them. We knew that as long as we communicated, as long as we kept our hearts open to each other, we could overcome anything. One crisp winter morning, as snow gently fell outside, Isabelle and I found ourselves once again sitting by the fire. The warmth of the flames flickered in the room, casting dancing shadows across the walls. We were comfortable in the silence, not needing to fill the space with words. It was enough just to be together, to share the quiet understanding that had become the foundation of everything. "Mark," Isabelle said, her voice soft but firm, "I don't know what the future holds, but I want to keep building with you. Whatever happens, I want us to keep trying." I smiled at her, my heart full. "I want that too, Isabelle. No matter what comes, we'll face it together. We're stronger than we think." And in that moment, I realized that the journey we had been on wasn't just about discovering each other. It was about discovering ourselves, learning to grow together, to overcome the fears and insecurities that had once held us back. It wasn't about having all the answers or knowing what the future would look like. It was about choosing to walk through life side by side, embracing the unknown with open hearts and a shared commitment to each other. We didn't need perfection. We just needed each other, and that, in the end, was more than enough. As the days passed, I could feel our bond growing stronger. We had faced the hardest parts, the doubts, the fears, the insecurities, and come out the other side. What we had now wasn't something easily broken. It was something built on trust, communication, and the willingness to fight for each other. No matter what, I knew that there would still be challenges ahead, but with Isabelle by my side, I felt ready to face them. Because we weren't just two people in love. We were two people who had chosen to walk through life together, to face everything the world threw our way, and to build something that was real, something that would last. And as we sat together that evening, the fire crackling softly in the background, I realized that this was just the beginning. Our journey wasn't over yet. But as long as we were together, I knew that we could handle anything that came our way. The unspoken bond we shared was stronger than anything we could face. And for the first time, I felt certain that it was enough to last a lifetime. Enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an update.